Welcome top news today.
President Donald Trump insisted on Sunday he has no plans to fire special counsel Robert Mueller, despite his team's recent attacks on the credibility of the probe into Russian meddling in the U.S. election. With the XP director's investigation making inroads into the president's inner circle in recent weeks, Republicans have sought to cast doubt on its impartiality and pressed for a new, independent prosecutor to investigate anti-Trump bias. This in turn has led to speculation that the administration could be laying the groundwork for firing Mr. Mueller. But Mr. Trump shot down those rumors. When asked whether he was going to fire Mueller, the president told reporters, "No, I'm not." In a letter to congressional committees, Mr. Trump campaign lawyer Corey Langhofer alleged the General Services Administration (GSA) unlawfully produced private materials, including privileged communications that Mr. Mueller then used as part of his Russia probe. The GSA is the government agency that supports presidential transitions, the interim period after a new president is elected but before he takes office. Mr. Langhofer wrote Mr. Mueller's office received from the GSA tens of thousands of emails, including a very significant volume of privileged material, according to a copy of the letter published by Politico. The letter added a warrant should have been obtained for such materials, and said it violated the Presidential Transition Act. Mr. Trump said, "My people are very upset about it, calling the development quite sad. I can't imagine there's anything on them, frankly, because as we said, there's no collusion. There's no collusion whatsoever," he said. But Mr. Mueller's spokesman Peter Carr told CNN emails were obtained for the probe after we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process. Probe Titan's M.R. Mueller was appointed after Mr. Trump abruptly fired FEMP Director James Comey, who was leading an agency probe into the Russia affair. The president's Democratic foes have sought to characterize the allegations of illegality as an attempt to stymie the probe, which has already led to charges against Mr. Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and 3 other people linked to the presidential campaign. Absolute redline: the firing of Bob Mueller or crippling the special counsel's office, Eric Holder, who served as Attorney General under Trump's predecessor Barack Obama, said, "If removed or meaningfully tampered with, there must be mass, popular, peaceful support of both. The American people must be seen and heard. They will ultimately be determinative." Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell said this is another attempt to discredit Mueller as his Trump-Russia probe tightens. Republicans asked the U.S. Justice Department on Wednesday to name a new independent prosecutor to probe alleged bias in the FBI. The special counsel's critics have seized upon the case of Peter Strzok, a senior FBI agent whom Mr. Mueller removed from his team for sending text messages critical of Mr. Trump. In addition to whether Mr. Trump's campaign team colluded with Russia to help him win last year's election, the special counsel is also looking at possible obstruction of justice linked to Mr. Trump's firing of Mr. Comey. Mr. Trump did so in May and later acknowledged he had the Russia probe in mind when he sacked him. Mr. Comey, for his part, wrote a memo alleging Mr. Trump had asked him to drop his investigation into Mr. Flynn, an act which some say could constitute obstruction of justice and thus grounds for seeking the president's impeachment, but the Justice Department's number 2, Rod Rosenstein, insisted this week that the investigation was impartial and free from any political influence. Mr. Trump has repeatedly denied claims of collusion with Russia and denounced the witch hunt against him.